Good morning, everyone. I am Christian Micah Esapa, and I am the reporter of the story of Tantalus and Newbie. So, before I start my report, let me introduce to you the main characters. First is, of course, Tantalus and Newbie, Phallops, Princess Hippodamia, Amphion and Zethus, and lastly, Atreus and Thyestes. So let's start. Tantalus was the son of Zeus and honored by the gods beyond all the mortals, children of Zeus. They allowed him to eat at their table, to taste the nectar and ambrosia, which except for him alone, none but the immortals could partake of. They did more. They came to the banquet in his palace. They condescended to dine with him. In return to their favor, he acted so unctuously that no poet ever tried to explain his conduct. He had his only son, Pelops, killed, boiled in a great cauldron, and served to the gods. Apparently, he was driven by a passion of hatred against them which made him willing to sacrifice his son in order to bring upon them the horror of being cannibals. He was a fool, the Olympians know. They drew back from the horrible banquet and they turned upon the criminal who had contrived it. He should be so punished, they declared, that no man to come, hearing what this man had suffered, would dare ever again to insult them. They set the arch sinner in a pool in Hades, but whenever in his tormenting thirst he stopped to drink he could not reach the water. It disappeared, drained into the ground, and is bent down. When he stood up, it was there again. Over the pool, fruit trees hung heavy laden with pears, pomegranates, rosy apples, sweet figs. Each time he stretched out his hand to grasp them, the wind tossed them high away out of reach. Thus he stood forever, his undying throat always thirst, his hunger in the midst of plenty never satisfied. Tantalus' son Pelops was restored to life by the gods, but they had to fashion a shoulder for him out of ivory. One of the goddesses, some say Demeter, some Thetis, inadvertently had eaten on the loathsome dish, and when the boy's limbs were assembled, one shoulder was wanting. This ugly story seems to have came down in his early brutal form quiet and softened. The latter Greeks did not like it and protested against it. The poet Pindar called it a tale decked out with glittering lies against the word of truth. Let a man not speak of cannibal deeds among the blessed gods. However that might be, the rest of Pelops' life was successful. He was the only one of Tantalus' descendants not marked out by misfortune. He was happy in his marriage, although he wounded a dangerous lady who had been the cause of many deaths, the Princess Hippodamia. The reason men died for her was not her fault, but her father's. The king had a wonderful pair of horses. Ares had given him superior, of course, to all mortal horses. He did not want whenever a suitor came for her hand, the youth was told he could race with their father for her. Ang kingapapa ni Princess Hippodamia kay hindi siya gusto magpakasal. So kung may maglakat sa iya nga mga manliligaw or suitor, gusto niya nga maglaban sila gamit ang horses or mag-race sila gamit ang horses. So kung magdaog ang iya nga suitor, iya na ang iya nga bata nga si Princess Hippodamia, pero kung ang papa nga magdaog nga king, ang kapalit is ang buhay sa isa ka suitor. So amo to dahilan nga damo na napatay nga mga lalaki or suitor. So si Pelops nagdare gyapon sa challenge sang king kay nagasalig siya sa regalo sa iya ni Poseidon, which is the horse. So nagdaog siya sa race. But there is a story that Hippodamia had more to do with the victory than Poseidon's horses. Either she fell in love with Pelops or she felt the time had come to put a stop to that sort of racing. Princess Hippodamia bribed her father's charioteer, a man named Myrtilius, to help her. He pulled out the bolts that held the wheels of the king's chariot, and the victory was Pelops with no trouble at all. But later, Myrtilius was killed by Pelops, cursing him as he died, and some said that this was the cause of misfortunes that afterward followed the family. But most writers said, and certainly with better reason, that it was the wickedness of Tantalus which doomed his descendants. None of them suffered a worse doom than his daughter Nube, and yet it seemed at first that the gods had chosen her out for good fortune, as they had her brother. She had happy in her marriage. Her husband was Amphion, a son of Zeus and an incomparable musician. He and his twin brother Zethus undertook once to fortify Thebes, building a lofty wall around it. Zethus was a man of great physical strength who despised his brother's neglect of manly sport and his devotion to his art. Yet, when it came to the heavy task of getting enough rocks for the wall, the gentle musician outdid the strong athlete. He drew such entrancing sounds from his lyre that the very stones were moved and followed him to Thebes. There he and Niobe rolled in entire content until she showed that the mad arrogance of Tantalus lived in her. She held herself raised by her great prosperity above that ordinary mortals fear and reverence. She was rich and nobly born and powerful. 7 sons had been born to her, brave and beautiful young men, and 7 daughters, the fairest of the fair. She thought herself strong enough not only to deceive the gods as her father had tried to do, but to defy them openly. She called upon the people of Thebes to worship her. You born in tents to Leto, she said, and what is she is compared with me? She had but 2 children, Apollo and Artemis. I have 7 times as many. I am queen. She was a homeless wanderer until tiny Dallas alone, of all places on earth, consented to receive her. I am happy, strong, great too great of for any. Consciousness of power, were only heard in heaven and only punished. To Pelops 2 sons were born, Atreus and Thyestes. The inheritance of evil descended to them in full force. Thyestes fell in love with his brother's wife and succeeded in making her false to her marriage vows. Atreus found out that the sword that Thyestes should pay as no one ever had. He killed his brother's 2 little children, had them cut limb from limb, boiled and served up to their father eaten. Poor wretch! When he had learned the dead abhorrent, he cried a great cry. Falling back swept out that flash, called it down upon the house a doom intolerable. The banquet bird sent crashing. Atreus was king. Thyestes had no power. The Atreus' crime was not avenged in the Atreus' lifetime, but his children and his children's children suffered.